Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology, and first daily Mormon history podcast. I'm Rick Bennett. We're going to dive deep into the Book of Mormon and talk about old world geography theories. Now, these are theories that most proponents generally pretty well accept, but we'll talk about some other interesting theories as well. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. Let's jump into old world geography. And this is one area that I think that, for the most part, most people who believe in the Book of Mormon pretty much agree with, and that's Middle Eastern geography. It seems like the frankincense route out of Israel and into the Arabian Peninsula, I don't know anybody that really disagrees with that per se. You've probably heard of Nahom. Proponents of this theory call it a bullseye. That was where Ishmael was buried. It was the land called Nahom. There's a Journey of Faith CD that documents this Middle Eastern geography very well. I've got a picture there, and there's a link as well. And I've got kind of some screenshots you can see for those of you, start out at Jerusalem, go down to the Sinai Peninsula, and then into the Arabian Peninsula. And then on that third map there, you can see they basically take a left and end up in Yemen or Oman. For Book of Mormon proponents, I don't think that this is controversial at all. I think pretty much everybody agrees that this is probably likely the route that Lehi traveled and his family, and ended up in Yemen, Oman area, and we'll talk about a couple of ports here. But in the interest of full disclosure, I'm always somebody who likes to listen to pro arguments as well as con arguments. This is a photo of John Hamer. He's a 70 in the Community of Christ. He left a comment on a blog, and he said, it should come as no shock to us that Nahom, a Hebrew prophet in the Bible, has a Semitic name. It should therefore also come as no shock that there are places in Semitic-speaking countries that share that name, or at least its consonants, NHM. Of course, Hebrew wasn't big on vowels, and so you could take NHM and refer to different places. John continues, when I first wrote about NHM on a bulletin board, I did a quick test. I said to myself, they speak Arabic in Iraq. Let's see if there is a NHM in Iraq. A quick Google search picks up on a place called Nahom in the Maysan province, immediately south of Al-Amara. In other words, if the Book of Mormon had said Lehi and his party traveled past Babylon, there was another potential Nahom bullseye waiting in Mesopotamia. Another Google search shows there's historically a town called Nahom in Lebanon, halfway between Tyre and Acre. If Joseph Smith had sent Lehi to America via Phoenicia, that would have been another bullseye. John continues, he says NHM is not a bullseye. John says it's not even noteworthy, given one has the entire volume of a large Semitic country in which to find common Semitic root. We would be surprised not to find a place name that is somehow similar to NHM. So anyway, there's kind of the con to that argument as well. Now, there's a couple of ports in Yemen. Warren P. Aston has promoted Khor Khofut as a port. He has a book called In the Footsteps of Lehi, New Evidences of Lehi's Journey Across the Arabic to Banifal. You can see that lush green shore there. Very, it seems to match a lot of places with the Book of Mormon. There's another proposed port called Khor Rori. George Potter has done a lot of work on that. He has a website at www.nephiproject.com, and I interviewed him a while back. His book is called Lehi in the Wilderness, and I've got a link there as well. I would say both of these are really good. I actually asked Brant Gardner which port he preferred. I was surprised he preferred George Potter's over Warren Aston. I think the BYU folks like Warren Aston's a little bit better. But they're both really, really good, plausible places for where Nephi built his ship. So let's jump into some of the internal theories. I know this is going to be something that Heartlanders are not a fan of, but I think it's still important to talk about when we're talking about all the theories. And most everyone bases their theory on John Sorensen's book, Mormon's Map. He's probably the most respected expert on Book of Mormon theories. He talks about historical theories as well. There's his book there. It's actually a really short book. You can jam through it pretty quickly. And I've got a link there that you can see. I know Heartlanders aren't fans of that. I have to tell you, this is where I became a little bit of a convert to the Atlantic crossing of the ocean. John Lefgren, good friend of mine, just found out he's in the hospital. I'm sad to hear that. So God bless you, John, if you're watching. Get well soon. We love you and miss you. But John helped me arrange an interview with Philip Beale. And Philip is kind of a modern day Columbus. I don't know how many of you are probably familiar with Philip. I will tell you, I went into this interview quite skeptical, and Philip made me a believer. So the interesting thing about Philip, he's not Mormon. He didn't know anything about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He was just a sailor. He joined the UK Navy to learn how to sail, and he loves to sail ancient ships. His first voyage was from Indonesia to Africa. People said he couldn't do it. That was recreating a voyage, I think it was 300 AD or 400 AD. And then he found out that the ancient Greek philosopher Herodotus had said that the Phoenicians had circumnavigated Africa. And and it was in 600 BC, which is, for Book of Mormon believers, a very interesting year. They actually found a Phoenician ship buried in a port in France. So he used that as his model and decided that he was going to do this. So this was back in 2009. The interesting thing about this is you probably heard of the movie with Tom Hanks called Captain Philip. It's not Philip Beale, it's another Philip, Captain Phillips, who unfortunately got captured by Somali pirates. That was the same year that Philip Beale, in his wooden sailboat, decided he was going to circumnavigate Africa. Now, unlike Lehi, Philip had a satellite phone and a few things, but basically his idea was he wanted to circumnavigate Africa. Well, he got down to Cape Town, had a really bad storm, just like happens in 2nd Nephi, blew him back about 18 miles. But as he turned the Cape of Good Hope there, the winds just naturally blew him. He was trying to circumnavigate Africa, right? He was trying to recreate this old voyage. It blew him only 300 miles away from Florida. Well, that wasn't his goal. His goal was to circumnavigate Africa, so he turned the ship around, and went back. Now, the interesting thing is it took Philip 2 years and 2 months. It took the ancient Phoenicians 3 years to circumnavigate Africa. So this is not a short voyage. It's amazing. I did ask Philip about, I'll talk about the Pacific crossing in just a minute, but one of the things he says, when you're talking about 600 BC, nobody has diesel engines, nobody has nuclear power. You're relying on wind, and when you're doing wind power, west is best. And so, anyway, I've got a couple of links there to the transcript of the interview. I became a big believer in Philip Beale. The funniest thing about Philip is he didn't just do this once. He decided, no, I want to do it again. The second way, this is a lot of you believe that the Mulekites may have taken a Mediterranean route. Well, the interesting thing about this, Philip recreated this voyage as well. It only took him 9 months. Once you get through the Mediterranean Sea around to Spain, he basically followed Christopher Columbus's route. Once again, ended up in Florida. Of course, this was a lot shorter trip, a lot easier trip in the sense that it only took 9 months, so it's a lot more straightforward way to go. And I did ask him also, well, could you, because I'm always interested in all the theories, not just one. Could you take that to, say, Guatemala? And he said, well, if you knew where you were going, yeah, but it's going to take you right to, the Caribbean and Florida naturally, and that's, kind of what it did with Christopher Columbus. So anyway, I really respect Philip Beale a lot. I think what he did is amazing. The sad thing was he landed in Florida right as COVID hit. I'll encourage you guys to visit Betty and Mike LaFontaine here. They're helping build a Phoenician museum, and they're trying to get Philip's ship, and they're rebuilding it across the river from the Nauvoo Temple in Iowa. So visit him for sure. Let's talk about the Jaredite crossing. This was something I just found out on Monday. I just added this slide this morning, literally this morning. And there's a guy named Blair Bryant. I believe he's a Community of Christ member. He might not be, but I'm pretty sure he is. He was talking about the Jaredites, with their barges, and basically he proposes that the Jaredites came across China. Of course, one of the benefits of that is a lot of the DNA experts believe that the Book of Mormon has Asian DNA, and so this would explain why they have Asian DNA. But, they're just bobbing around in the ocean, and it took the Jaredites 344 days to cross the ocean, and basically they weren't sailing. They were just following the currents. Now, if you remember a couple years ago, there was that big earthquake in Fukushima, Japan. The nuclear power plant melted down. We were worried about nuclear radiation, but it was caused by a massive earthquake. One of the amazing things about that earthquake was a lot of ships and soccer balls and personal items followed this red route here that you can see on the map. And about a year after the Fukushima earthquake, you're finding boats and soccer balls and personal items that are ending up in California. Well, the currents do take you up along the Beringia, Alaska Straits. This is me, and you can tell I don't have really good Photoshop skills, kind of drawing the basic current there. But this is another way to go, and it took about a year. You don't need wind power. The one thing I did mention to Philip Beale about this was anytime you go closer to the North Pole or closer to the South Pole, those seas are incredibly rough. And he said it's very tough sailing. So if this is what the Jaredites did, it would have been especially as you get up around Alaska, those seas are going to be very rough. Remember the thing about the two holes, one on the top, one on the bottom. And so, it's an interesting theory. Like I said, I only learned about it on Monday, so I don't have a lot of information on it. I think I probably could get a little bit more information on that because I think he presented it a couple of months ago, but I just found out about it on Monday. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting theory as well. Now, this is the theory that the Mesoamerican proponents propose. Basically, once again, you can see they start off in Yemen, Oman, that sort of area, Khor Kofut or Khor Rori. They kind of go around India. Once again, my drawing skills aren't that great, but this is basically the idea. The problem with a Pacific crossing, it's twice the distance of an Atlantic crossing. We already know it took Philip 2 years to go around Africa. So this would, if it's twice the distance, what's that going to take, 4 years? You're against the wind. I asked Philip specifically because there is an equatorial countercurrent, and when you look at it, it ends up right in Guatemala. So if you're a meso expert, in one sense, that's really appealing. And I asked Philip about that. He says, here's the problem. That equatorial countercurrent goes about 1 mile an hour, and the wind is going to blow you in the opposite direction. And so it's going to overcome that countercurrent. You have to rely on wind power. And so kind of this equatorial crossing just isn't feasible. This is the one that you see on the Journey of Faith DVD. And so I think if you're gonna cross the oceans on a 600 BC ship, you're going to have to take the Atlantic Ocean. I just personally don't believe Pacific Ocean is a plausible way to go. I hope you enjoyed our conversation about the Old World geography. In our next conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about African, Asian, and New World theories of the Book of Mormon. I will just mention a couple of other things here on this map. You'll notice here around India, there's a little island there. That's the island of Sri Lanka. Just keep that in mind. As we continue on the second map, you can see that it goes down the Malay Peninsula. Those are two other geography theories that we're going to discuss now. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, subscribe on either Patreon or at gospeltangents.com. For just $5 a month, you can hear the entire audio uninterrupted. On our $10 tier, if you would like to see the whole video, you can see that either on youtube.com/gospeltangents, or I've got a special Facebook group devoted for full videos. So subscribe at gospeltangents.com and sign up for just $10 a month. For $20 a month, if you'd like to get some bonus content, maybe some of the stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor, you can sign up for that. And then if you'd like to talk to me for $100 a month, we'll do a monthly phone call on something like Zoom, and you can ask me anything you want. So thanks again. Also, don't forget about the merch, mugs, t-shirts, hats, things like that. I'm trying to get the ties up there. Hopefully I can get up there. And thanks again for watching Gospel Tangents, and click here for some more videos.